Welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. Today we're going to be talking about the starter home and why currently you are not seeing a lot of them.
Yeah, so let's jump into starter homes. Like Danille and I were having a debate right before this, and I said, let's save this. Let's save this. Because here's the thing. Like, I've been through cycles. Like, this youngster over here, she really hasn't. Although I think she would say she has.
I haven't really been through cycles.
Like, I went through the 70s. I went through the crashes. I went through the... But let me tell you one thing. I will tell you this. The home my parents bought in the 60s was like 1,400 square feet, 1,500 square feet. My dad added on. But here's the point. You start to look at when prices go up, and I know it's all relative, right? But prices went up during that period of time, and what happens? They respond by building smaller homes.
We have a debate because Ken thinks they're going to start bringing back more starter homes, where I feel like starter homes are going to be tough because I don't know if the math.
And thankfully, I don't do this on feelings. What I do it on is history. So that's the big difference. So here's the thing. Like it factually has happened. If you take a look at these coastal cities, let's pick on LA, San Francisco, Boston, let's say. When prices go up, developers respond by building smaller. We do it in apartments all the time. That's why if you take a look at New York, right? Like I remember when I used to go there in my 30s with visit my buddy. Like his apartment was like 300 square feet, right? He was paying a lot of money. And so what happens with high prices, people respond. They buy buildings, they cut them up smaller, or they build buildings smaller, and that's what's happening now. There was a time where we used to do like one-bedroom units, let's say 1,000 square feet or 950 or whatever, and now we're down in the sixes and even in the fives. Okay, so we're almost cutting the square footage in half. What hasn't changed that much? If the city allows and if the builder can, they're going to start cutting it out. And guess what? I came armed with receipts.
Okay, but hold on. No. You just threw in something that would change everything. Is you said if the city allows smaller homes, if the city allows smaller parcels, then I think it can work for the builders. But if they have to build on the same piece of land.
Of course.
Okay, well, now you're changing the rules.
No, I'm actually talking about the home. I'm not talking about the land.
Okay, well,
I'm talking about the home itself. And if you look, we've already adjusted since pre-pandemic by 100 to 300 square foot. The home builders are already doing this. So it's already happening right before your eyes. And in the 70s, it went down 10 to 15%. So it is, if you think about it, if I'm going to build a home, let's say today, that's $300,000. That's the cost. And I can carve out 30, 40, 50 grand of cost and deliver that. That gives me more margin. So what happens is, as homeowners can't afford, the market responds by trying to deliver affordability. And one way that they can do that's outside of Trump, is the size.
But the cities have to be on board because they have to change zoning.
The city's not going to care if it goes from 2,500 to 2,100. Like that's not a city issue. They're still going to say you need to have now it could be an HOA issue because when I built my house, they said your house has to be at least 3,500 square feet on this particular lot. That was a long time ago, 20 years ago. So there are restrictions on the conformity of a neighborhood. So I'll give you that.
But I do think that the builders are going to want to build until the full lot size. Like we were just at Lennar a couple weeks ago with a client, and I mean, it's house to house to house.
But that works if they sell.
Yeah, but if they don't sell, does the math work if it's smaller?
Well, what do you want? You want to deliver affordability, or the developer can't always maximize the lot. I get where you're coming from, but let's go back to the old days where you would have a 1,500 square foot home on a 1 acre lot. I mean, like we live in Coeur d'Alene in the summer, those are everywhere. People are ripping them down. And what are they doing? They're building a big, main, beautiful home, and then they're putting an ADU in the back, and that's what they're doing. They're taking huge lots. And so if history repeats itself, which I believe that it does, people forget. Market cycles don't care. And so as affordability gets out of reach, if they can, they start to adjust with size.
And I would agree, but the builders still have to make money. So if they're not making money, they're not going to, they might have existing product they have to make money on, but if the math isn't going to math for them, they just don't have to build. I mean,
well, the real issue is, will the homeowner buy a smaller house?
I don't think that that's the issue. I think that my first-time home buyers would love a smaller house if it was affordable.
Well, then why wouldn't the builder do that?
Because if the land is so expensive and the labor is so expensive, they have to make money.
Well, hold on. Okay, this is awesome. Like if I can give your client a 2,000 square foot home versus a 3,000 square foot home, I'm gonna build more of those and sell more of those.
I'm not talking about 2,000 and 3,000 square feet. I'm talking about your typical starter home, 1,400 or so square feet, going down lower because you're already squeezing your margins. Because that's why they're so tight together, and that's why they already use cheap material. They already don't really have a yard. Last year only 21% of buyers were first-time home buyers. So if they're still going to build and they're still not going to buy, then it's not advantageous for them to build them anyways. Most buyers right now are not first-time home buyers.
You have a skewed reality. Here's the thing. Builders will build, period. A home builder doesn't hang up their tool belt and say, I'm going to wait this cycle out. That does not happen. Lennar, Pulte, they all figure it out. They sit back in their rooms and they're like, okay, what can we do to lower the cost of our house and still build, period. What market can we go to? What size do we need to build? And they deliver what the consumer needs and, of course, only what gets sold. Because at the end of the day, the person buying the home is what pays every single person. Mm-hmm. So the market responds. The builder does not stop building, period. And you name me one time in history where that's happened.
Well, probably 2008.
Builders still built during that time. Yeah, if you're a public home builder, yes, you built a lot less. And yes, you probably took some pain during that period of time, but they're still around, aren't they?
And now a word from my paid sponsor, PadSplit. Look, if you've been trying to make single-family rentals pencil out in this market, you already know that the math can be tight. With high rates, properties that would have cash flowed 5 years ago now often break even at best. So what do? You wait on the sidelines and miss out, or maybe you find a better model? That's why I want to talk about today's sponsor, PadSplit. Here's an example of the math in some markets. A 4-bedroom renting for $2,700 as a traditional rental may be able to gross over $6,000 a month in a co-living setup through PadSplit, depending on location, occupancy, and costs. The same house can potentially more than double the gross revenue in the right market. And before you think, that sounds like a headache, PadSplit helps with member screening and rent collection while still allowing you to operate the property and make management decisions. This is one strategy investors use to try to make deals work when traditional rentals don't pencil. If you want to see the numbers for yourself, go to padsplit.com/hosts. I'll have a link in the description. Just run the math on the property you already own and see if it's a fit. You might be surprised.
So yes, they still build. Again, a builder builds, period. They don't stop. We do. A small little investor doesn't think this way. I get it. But this is not that case. If your job is to wake up every day and go build a home building, like we flew in yesterday into a really, really small town right on the border of Utah and Nevada. I don't know if you looked at all the home. Oh, that's right. You weren't on that flight. There was. I was looking out. There was home building going on to my left, to my right, and I was like, man, look at this. This little community here is on fire. And so that's what happens.
But I can tell you, when I went to the Lennar Homes last week, is that something interesting they're doing is they are putting ADUs attached to the homes, and they have a separate entrance. Not all of them, but there's certain models, and they have a separate entrance, and they can go straight through. You never have to see the person attached, and they're marketing it as your mother-in-law can live here, or you can rent it out, because you are allowed to rent it out. So I think that is their angle of trying to make things more affordable.
But they're not doing that for charity.
No.
That's a cost. Like the home buyer pays for that. Just like they pay for an upgraded floor. Or
they are, but at the same time, the home was still that 1,500 square feet, just like the other ones. This one just had I don't know how many 400 square foot, 80 or whatever it was, ADU attached to it, attached to the garage.
But why would they add? How can adding more square footage make things more affordable?
They didn't add more square footage.
Well, they would. An ADU takes up more.
No, they basically had homes that were 1,500 square feet or homes that were 1,100 square feet with a 400 square foot ADU attached.
So they're the exact same.
Mm-hmm.
Why does that make more sense?
Because it makes it affordable. Because if somebody rents that out for
how is that cheap?
800,
1,500 square feet. Well, you just rebrand it.
Because if somebody's helping with their mortgage, because if it's an $800 ADU that you're renting out, then you can take that off of your monthly mortgage every month. That's why they're doing it.
Okay, but it's the home price doesn't change. All it does is it transfers the income risk to the person buying the house.
But people are trying to solve to the monthly payment, and when you get $800
no,
a month,
that makes sense. But they're solving. But that's not affordable housing. That basically that's house hacking. That's actually Lennar stepping up, or Pulte, or whoever the company is, and saying, I'm going to offer the homeowner some way to house hack.
Yep.
But that's
help them with the payment.
But yeah. But I get that. But that's not affordable housing.
Yep.
That is not. No, the price is the same.
But that's what they're doing right now.
Oh no, I love the idea,
and I don't think it's a horrible idea either.
I love the idea.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, listen, if you can help people, get into these, right? It'll be interesting to see how the mortgage company does those, right? Like, how do we finance something that's both primary and a rental? But regardless of that 1,500 square foot home that you just mentioned, it's not cheaper.
No, but I will say I think this is interesting. There was none available of that. So that's clearly a selling point.
By the way, I love that idea.
Yeah.
But what if they, since they're not going to occupy that 400 square feet, what if they just built a home 1,100 square feet?
Well, they're on minimum lot sizes already, so then the builder loses money.
How? You mean because they get that extra 400 square feet?
Because, they're still paying for the same amount for the land.
I know, but...
and now they're not getting that money.
But again, if we're talking about affordability, we're talking about a price of a home. Mm-hmm. The price of a home is less at 1,100 square foot than it is at 15. Mm-hmm. Period.
Yep. And the builder makes less money, period.
Of course. Mm-hmm. Right. That's the other side of affordability. That's if you're talking capitalism at its finest, right? Mm-hmm. What they've done is they figured out a way for the homeowner to subsidize their mortgage if they want to rent that other piece, but it doesn't solve the affordability problem.
Yeah, I mean they're selling. I mean they're selling it where they're at. I mean they definitely are. I mean they just raised their rates.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we just have two different views. And by the way, 1,500 square foot brand new home is small.
But I will say, though, that if, at least in the Phoenix area, that if you're looking at new builds, they're way out. I mean, they're not in, your main part of town either, because there's just not A, room, and B, cost. So they are, and the further you go out, the cheaper and more affordable those homes are.
Well, that's because of the land. Mm-hmm. So let me be clear on this, because we're a builder. A 1,500 square foot home out on the edge of town or in the middle of town is the exact same cost. Mm-hmm. The difference is the land.
Yep.
So when land becomes cheaper, then the whole thing becomes cheaper. And that's why the cheaper homes are out on the edge of town. That's pretty common. But I want to be clear. If somebody's living in 1,100 square feet, I mean, that's the size of our 2-bedroom, 1-bath or 2-bedroom, 2-baths in our apartments. That's small. That's a extremely efficiently well designed place. It'd be interesting to see whether they have garages on that or not.
Yeah, there was a garage, and the ADU was attached to basically the entrance of the ADU was a separate entrance through the garage from this.
I love that. So again, I guess the point of this is the market responding.
Yeah, it is. And that was very unusual. I've never seen that.
I haven't seen that either. I love that idea because ADUs are all over. And what they're doing is they're basically building a house hack. Mm-hmm. That's essentially, if you guys don't know what a house hack is, if you live in a home where there's a separate entrance and somebody can rent it from you, that could be however you want. It could be long-term rent, could be even an Airbnb. That is essentially a house hack. You're living in one side and you're renting another side, and it's helping you work things out. And that could be the new normal. If that could be a trend that's going to move forward. But I will tell you, 1,500 square foot brand new home, that's small compared to history, right? Because I think we're closer to in the low twos, right? The average brand new home that's being built is in the low twos, and this is my original point. When affordability starts to become a problem, then they shrink those things down. And what they've done is they've shrunk it down to 1,500, and they've carved out 400 for somebody else. So I can't imagine it getting much smaller than that. But just to be clear, those were the sizes of homes in the 1950s. So that's really, really interesting.
But if you also look around other parts of the world, they tend to live in very small areas. And with the average first-time homebuyer being now, 36 or so, they're very used to apartment life, which is smaller.
And that's worth mentioning. The first-time homebuyer in the 70s was 27, 28 years old, and now it's 10 years older. Mm-hmm. Like it's in the 36 to 37 years old. That is so. What's happened during that period of time is home sizes haven't changed that much. Mm-hmm. But affordability has, and so that should pretty much solve that argument right there. Essentially, wage growth has not kept up,
right?
And people can't afford like they were able to, and also, I was alive in the 80s, and I remember that interest rates were double digit, like 12, 13, 14, 15% interest rates, right? So people are bitching now and they're in sixes, but they were a lot more than, And so not only did you have higher interest rates, but you had the smaller places. So now you got smaller places, smaller interest rates, and it's almost 10 years more for the first-time home buyer. They're in their mid-30s.
And I don't even know that younger generation necessarily wants a bigger home. They definitely don't want the very big homes. They care more about location, and they care more about...
Well, you bring up a heck of a point.
Yeah.
Part of that is the family. People are having less kids. The families have gotten smaller, that's for sure. And to your point, that actually does change. Again, the home builders are going to build based on what the demographics tell them. And there's a lot more people not getting married as quickly. There's a lot more people not driving. I remember at 16, I couldn't wait to get my driver's license. That's all moved. And also having a family has moved. So all of that changes the home ownership type and home ownership rate. But we're still at 133 million homeowners, right? That's a lot. Homeowner units. So that's the home ownership number right now in the U.S., 133 million. It's gone up from 127, which is in 2019.
So I think what's interesting, though, is there's been a big shift. So one of the bigger shifts, I think, is moving to townhomes and condos. So I have a lot of first-time home buyers, and I would say 80% of them are buying a townhome or a condo versus a single-family house. Part of that is price, I would say a big part. But then there's also this big part of lacking of a lot of responsibility, right? Because they are single and they don't have kids a lot of the time. And on a condo, you just have to worry about your water heater and your HVAC system. You don't have to worry about the roof. You don't have to worry about the lawn. There's a lot of lock and leave. They feel like it's much easier to rent out or leave or whatever they want to do. So I think that's a big transition because, 20 years ago, people weren't buying and living in condos as a first-time home buyer a lot of the time.
I agree, but I will just say one thing. Historically, condos and townhomes are always at the end of a cycle. That's historically. That's the way it was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, 2000. It's because, again, the market responds to a lower price. They want to build things that people can buy and own and things that they can sell. And so there's a cycle, and condos are traditionally, and townhomes are traditionally at the tail end of a cycle because of affordability. There is a difference this time around, and to your point, I do think that the need is different. Like if you're if you're single and you're in your 30s, you don't really want a 3,000 square foot home with a big yard and all the extra expense. You're better off to be in a high rise,
I have to laugh because my stepson just bought a house and he has like this small little yard, and we go over there, and it's been 2 months and the grass is like up to here.
It was up to my knees. I'm like, dude, you got to mow your lawn.
And he thinks he's just going to get a mower and just push it through all that.
I'll just knock that out. I'm like, okay, first time, first timer.
Yeah.
But he beat the curves. He's in his late 20s.
He is, but it's just funny because it's that kind of stuff, the responsibility of things like a yard, and that a lot of people don't want on top. If you're a single person, I mean, a condo affords you plenty of space.
He has no clue what it's going to take to manage that house. Just, I remember my first house. I was like, what? I mean, all the little things, the maintenance guy, the landscaper, the hot water tank, the water softener, the appliance repair guy, like whatever it is, like it just ka-ching, 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 right?
Yeah, totally. And I also think there's something interesting that wasn't happening before. And now they're doing these build to rent communities. So they're essentially saying, okay, apartment renter, I know you want a yard, I know you want a garage, I know you're having kids and you want a home, so I'm going to rent a home to you so you don't have to buy it because you can't afford to buy it or because you want to be more fluid. So that's a new thing that's happening. Build to rent is, these communities are fairly a new thing.
I've watched these for years, actually. I was around them in Vegas, and ironically, build to rent actually came out of Arizona. A couple guys that I know, and it's really smart. And then it became so popular that the home builders have jumped in. And however, one big home builder just sold off their multifamily division for a huge loss recently. I don't know if you know that. Not everybody's equipped for it. There's a science to it, just like anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's not a slam dunk for sure.
No. But if you can get 6 or 7 units on an acre, single level, you're pretty good.
Do they have different, because you would know this, do they have different standards as far as zoning if it's build to rent?
100%. Yeah, it's a really good question. Okay. So here's the thing. The factors are the land cost plus the construction cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
So typically, a developer tries to maximize the number of units on an acre. And I would say a number is somewhere between 15 to 17 units per acre is kind of the number. So in this particular case, it might be half. And a build-to-rent, it might be half. The difference is, in a lot of build-to-rents, you don't have an upstairs neighbor, right? And you also have a garage. So with the apartments, you'll have 16 or 17 per acre. You'll have 2-story, your walk up, you've seen it, you park under your carport, and those are usually around the outside, what we call the perimeter parking, right? And now what you're starting to see as the build-to-rents, a lot of times, sometimes they have carports, but sometimes they have garages. You put garages on those, then of course it reduces the amount of units you could put on an acre, as an example. When you start to do a townhome, it's a little bit easier to put a garage in there because now you're walking up stairs, and you can typically do the garage on the first floor, or you park in the garage and then you enter and you go straight up the stairs. You guys have probably seen those. We've done those in apartments too. So they're all a little bit different, but the build to rents are traditionally single level, which means that you essentially cut off all the potential for the units above it. There's no city that's actually going to say, we don't want you to go 2-story. Like they like it, They like 2-story, right? And so what you'll find is a perfect build to rent site would be to buy like a mobile home community. and to convert that over to build to rent as an example. So traditionally, build to rent is on the outside of town, on the edge of town, where land's a little bit cheaper. Because again, the math is land plus construction, but they've held their values extremely well. But again, if you buy 20 acres, you might get 150, 200 units on that. Whereas, if we bought 20 acres, we might do 300 units.
So say people are buying in these starter home communities, and, we both have agreed that they're kind of more on the edge of town because land's cheaper. If there were to be a cycle change and a correction, these kind of areas do get hit the hardest, though, right? Traditionally?
It depends on how they're financed and depends on the individual, but not always. I think that, you usually, a builder, it does some kind of incentives, and we're seeing that now, right? So it's going to depend entirely on the person that buys it, right? So that's and typically on the outside of town, you find the affordable, right? On the inside, in the core, it's usually a little bit more expensive. So, and typically people that are a little tighter are buying more affordable. So that's why that's that way. But yep.
So what does this really mean for investors? Like, what should the writing on the wall be for them? This lack of starter homes currently that's happening and the position that first-time home buyers are in.
Well, there's a few things. It depends on if you're buying or you're buying to move into that, or you're buying.
Well, you're an investor, so I guess
if you're buying to invest. I actually we have Trump's come out and said that he believed I think he's going to come after that first time home buyer, like in a positive way, right? He's going to figure out a way where there's going to be policy around this. There's going to be, whether it's the 50-year mortgage, whether it's a portable mortgage, whether it's a 401k that they can use to put their down payment on, or whether it's going to be a low down payment or whatever it is, there's going to be something. He's going to be all over this issue because even at Davos, he said, we don't want a nation of renters. So, and I agree with him. We want people to move into, these homes because even if they're 1,500 square feet, they're going to be worth more in 10 years, right? If they can hold on. So, I think we're all, by the way, there's a lag. Well, what does lag mean? When Trump wants something, he may or may not get it. But even if he gets it, it takes a good year or two before it really starts to come into the marketplace. And so right now we have, we have this affordability issue. We have an average $2,700 a month mortgage payment and an average $1,700 a month rent payment. So the delta between rental and mortgage is incredibly high right now. And so, we make no mistake, we still have an affordable problem.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is the renters right now, especially today, they're in the driver's seat. They have lots of choices, and specifically on the apartment side. But if you build something right now and you're trying to rent it right now, you're feeling some pain. And so that's if you're an investor and trying to get that same tenant, you're going to have a lot more competition.
I think these 2-2s need to be looked at, though. Like right now I'm looking for a house for a 1031 for myself. And, I'm really keen on 2-2s. I've had a really easy time renting them. I think they're cheaper most of the time. But I think trying to get investors or especially home buyers to wrap their head around a 2-2 because they want that additional bedroom. But I think as far as an affordability standpoint goes, buyers like to wait pretending that they're going to be able to save up more money or prices are going to come down or something's going to happen. But they really miss the, inflation is going to outpace your savings account, right? So if you're just saving, you're just going to keep farther and farther behind. Where if you can buy something and get into it, even for, 5, 7, 10 years, and then you can go into something that you appreciate more, right? But at least then you're getting the equity.
Yeah, for me, it always just boils down to math. If you're actually doing it for a rental standpoint. So a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage home that's, let's say, 1,500, 1,600 feet is going to rent for almost as much as a 3-bedroom. Not quite as much, but the incremental cost of a 3-bedroom to purchase a 3-bedroom is a lot more. So as an example, this is an example, by the way, you might pay another $100,000 for a 3-bedroom home. Mm-hmm. But the incremental cost of rent, you might only get a few $100. Like for example, Daniel's got a 2-bedroom, 2-bath that rents for what, $2,700 or something like that. Okay, $2,700 for a 1,700 square foot home, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, built in the 80s. A 3-bedroom home in the neighborhood next door, maybe it rents for $3,000, $3,200. So it's easily $100,000, $150,000 more for a 3-bedroom home. So that's the difference. So you don't really get that much more. So when you're just looking at the math, to your point, I'd rather buy a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and pass that affordability back to the renter that wants a home, and keep that rent as low as possible, because your rents can be under those 3-bedroom. Most homes are 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, and so if you can keep your rent underneath a home, you're gonna do really well.
Well, and you have to think too, like they always tell you it's hard to rent a 2-2. I've never had any issue renting a 2-2. I found it extremely easy compared to a 3-2, because it's more affordable and people throw their kids in one room, and they're saving money every month because they're very tight.
Yep.
And then I've also had investors that are trying to buy 4- and 5-bedroom homes, and I have to tell them, listen, there's a rent cap, like just because a 3-bedroom rents for this and a 4-bedroom for this and a 5, it's like at some point somebody's going to buy a house, right? Like if they can afford $4,500 a month in rent, they're going to just buy. So you have to really understand whatever that rent cap is, and then keep your price point of purchase under that.
And this is kind of the point. Like a 2-bedroom, 2-bath will always be the most affordable type of a home, period. Mm-hmm. Right? So I'm a big believer on buying toward affordability. And your rent will get sucked up to that 3-bedroom, trust me, and it won't be as much for sure, because that extra bedroom, is worth something. But if you take a look at the incremental price, I don't think it's worth it. And so I think the 2-bedroom, 2-bath home, all day long,
The only way it would not be worth it is obviously if it was a similar price to a 3-2, but secondly, if things didn't need to be affordable anymore, like people were making tons of money.
Oh, for sure, right? Then they go to the 3.
Yeah, then they're like, I want another bedroom. But if you really look at the way of the economy and the way things are going, unless you think people are going to have a bunch of money to spend in the next 10, 20 years, or you think that their rents are going to go down so much that they'll be easily able to afford that 3-2. That's really the only pushback to that.
I do love how it all got back to this 2-2 example that I brought up earlier.
I love my.
When she called me cocky.
I love my 2-bed, 2-bath. Honestly, I wish that they would build more homes like that. We'll see if they do.
I wonder why.